This is Akashwani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on warning to offshore digital service providers. The Financial Intelligence Unit India issues compliance notices. The participants are Ashima Batra, Additional Director, Financial Intelligence Unit India, and Gaura Dhawanlal, Anchor.
Hello and welcome to our program. The virtual digital asset service providers were brought under the ambit of the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Financing of Terrorism framework under the provisions of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2022 in March 2023. In fact, our topic for discussion today is warning to offshore digital service providers. The Financial Intelligence Unit of India issues compliance notices. Please join me in welcoming to our program Ashima Batra, Additional Director, FIU, India. Ashima, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Karan. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And Ashima, this is an area where not very many of us know a lot about. So it would be wonderful to begin if you could give us a context of what the Financial Intelligence Unit of India does and just briefly its ambit.
Sure. I'll start with what FIU India does and what its mandate is under Prevention of Money Laundering Act, that is PMLA 2002. So basically, Financial Intelligence Unit of India is the national nodal agency which is responsible for analysis of the intelligence, which is received from the reporting entities. So basically, Financial Intelligence Unit of India is standing somewhere in between and it's acting as an interface between the reporting world, the financial world on one side. And when I say financial world, I mean all the constituents in the financial ecosystem, like the banks, the intermediaries, the real estate agents, the dealers in gems and jewelry, and now, of course, the virtual digital asset service providers. So they are all on one hand the constituents of the financial ecosystem. In between, somewhere in the middle, we have the Financial Intelligence Unit, which is receiving or collecting information or intelligence from all these constituents, analyzing it, processing it, and further passing it on to the law enforcement agencies and the intelligence agencies like Enforcement Directorate, Central Bureau of Investigation, Intelligence Bureau, Research and Analysis Wing, Cabinet Secretariat of the Government of India, and so on and so forth. And the mandate for acting as the national nodal agency for analysis and processing of information and intelligence flows from PMLA. And if you look at the origin, like where does the concept of FIU itself, like the Financial Intelligence Unit, emanate from? So we can trace it to Financial Action Task Force. So essentially, Financial Action Task Force, that is FATF, like the acronym that it has. So FATF is an international anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism watchdog, the AML-CFT watchdog. So it is a body, it's an intergovernmental body, and India is a member, of course, to it since 2010. And it comes out with recommendations and also conducts reviews of the member nations. So among the various recommendations which FATF has come out with respect to money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism, among the 40 recommendations that are there, one recommendation specifically and primarily pertains to Financial Intelligence Unit, and that is recommendation number 29. So it requires a member country which is member of FATF to have a Financial Intelligence Unit, kind of an agency or body whose job will be to act as an interface between the constituents of the financial ecosystem on the supply side and the law enforcement and the intelligence agencies on the demand side. This is how the Financial Intelligence Unit, comes into picture, and it came in existence in 2004. And since 2004, since the ambit of the reporting entities, as we call them, like the banks, the financial institutions, and when I say financial institutions, it includes virtually all the banks, the private banks, public sector banks, cooperative banks, the regional rural banks, everything, and also the intermediaries on the stock exchange side, the SEBI side. So the ambit of entities, the reporting entities, has been expanding ever since 2004, and today, as we are in 2023, the ambit is quite wide. And it was just recently this year in 2023, in the month of March, that virtual digital asset service providers, that is the ones which cater to the crypto, we call as virtual digital assets, or called as crypto, currency service providers. So they also have been now brought into the ambit of the PML Act. So now they are also reporting entities since March this year for Financial Intelligence Unit India and brought into the ambit. And when I say they were brought into ambit, they have a lot of responsibilities and obligations cast on them under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act that they have to fulfill or discharge, as we say. And this is brief about what we do at Financial Intelligence Unit. And when I say that we receive intelligence or information from all these reporting entities in the financial ecosystem, so we have a mechanism of reporting, and that mechanism is also as per the rules under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And so the various kinds of reports that we receive from these reporting entities, like suspicious transaction, report, cross-border wire transfer report, counterfeit currency report, and so on and so forth. So these reports are received by us and then made either disseminated just like that to the law enforcement agencies, or developed upon and further honed and added upon and then disseminated to law enforcement agencies in the form of what we call as operational analysis, which is kind of a value added product, or in form of tactical analysis. Okay. So there are three kinds of products that are disseminated to law enforcement agencies from FIU's side. One is the suspicious transaction reports, as we receive them from the reporting entities, and if we develop upon them, work upon them, add some value to them, or do our own analysis so that it becomes more focused, incisive, more actionable. So that's what we call as operational analysis or tactical analysis.
Right. So if you could also help us understand, you have virtual digital asset service providers and you have offshore digital service providers. If you could just tell us, what kind of organizations come under this, what really are offshore digital service providers, just for our listeners to get a context before we move on to the compliances.
As regards virtual digital asset service providers, as I said, they came into the ambit of AML CFT network and thus, became a reporting entity for FIU India this year in March. So there was so basically this all flows from a notification. And since, virtual digital assets or cryptocurrency is a concept, which essentially doesn't have borders, so what we mean by offshore and onshore entities is that suppose I'm an Indian user and I am transacting in cryptocurrency or virtual digital assets through a platform. Say, suppose if the platform is an Indian entity. By an Indian entity, I mean onshore entity. If it's registered, if it's incorporated in India, right, then we call it as onshore, entity like ZepPay, Binance. Then you have BitBNS, you have CoinSwitch. So there are many such, crypto exchanges, or brokers, or what we collectively call them as VDA SPs. So these are the ones which are onshore. But I can also, transact in crypto on the offshore platforms like Binance, Huobi, OKX, like Bitstamp, etc. So there are many international players as well. So there is nothing that stops, an Indian as a user from transacting on a platform which is incorporated and operating in India, by which I mean is having brick and mortar presence in India, or having a brick and mortar presence outside somewhere else, right? So this is how, we distinguish them, the offshore and the onshore. So when I talk about CoinDCX, ZepPay, and BitBNS, the Indian exchanges, so these are the onshore entities. And when I talk about Binance, OKX, Huobi, right, etc., I mean offshore exchanges. So since the regulation which has come into picture, because the nature of, this world, this crypto ecosystem is such that it's not possible, to limit it by borders, because the very concept of crypto is borderless.
Right.
So the regulation also doesn't cast or differentiate between onshore and offshore. So it just talks about activity. So if I'm an Indian and if I'm transacting, so wheresoever I'm transacting, whether on an Indian entity or through a non-Indian entity or an offshore entity, I am obliged, to follow or to come under the ambit of the PML Act. So this is what, we mean or understand by the, onshore and the offshore. So here what was happening was that, we have quite a substantial, I can say, user base. I mean, Indian customer user base transacting through offshore entities. Of course, they are transacting through the onshore entities as well, but quite a substantial through offshore as well. So the action that, we will be talking about, of course, quite in a while during the day, is something which flows from this, because we have a lot of presence on the offshore exchanges. So that was what necessitated, us to take the action as has been taken by the government of India.
So when we talk of compliance breaches, what are some main categories into which these breaches fall?
So as I said, I've been very repeatedly using the term reporting entity. So in case any entity or in the financial ecosystem comes into the ambit, the AML CFT ambit under Prevention of Money Laundering Act, so it qualifies to become a reporting entity for FIU India. So as a reporting entity, there are a lot of obligations, and obligation of each kind can be a breach of compliance. So it can be like the first and foremost is that you come and register with FIU India. That is one. Then a second is you come and register, and you also designate a sufficiently senior person in your entity as a designated director and as a principal officer. So these are the two persons who are kind of going to be the nodal persons for us. And we also expect that these nodal persons who are designated or appointed by the entity have a fairly decent level of understanding of the AML CFT framework, and also have handled compliances. So that is the second requirement. That is, first is registration with FIU India. Second is appointing a DD and a PO with us. Third requirement is reporting requirement, that you start filing a set of reports. So a suspicious transaction report. Suppose I am an entity, a lot of transactions are happening on my platform, and I observe during the course of transaction monitoring that, okay, look, this activity or this particular transaction looks a little fishy to me. Like a lot of money is coming in one account in one day, and simultaneously just leaving it the same time or in 5 minutes, or maybe in a period of some 2 hours or 1 hour. So this is suspicious. Okay. So just like that. So these are the kind of transactions or reports we expect them to report to us. So this is what we call a suspicious transaction report. So this is the third kind of requirement, that is what we call as a reporting requirement. Then other than that, what is also expected is to carry out enhanced due diligence. Like in case you feel that there's any customer on your platform which looks a little fishy or a little suspicious, then you ask extra questions, like there's a lot of inflow of money in your account, or a lot of outflow happening through your account. So how is it happening? It's not matching with your profile. So an enhanced due diligence is another set of obligations that is there. Other than that, for the virtual digital asset service providers, what is very critical is the implementation of travel rule. So travel rule is again a kind of a jargon that we use in the crypto sphere. So it is like if there's a transaction happening, so I should have as an exchange visibility of who is sending and who is receiving. Okay. So that who is very important when a transaction happens, so that tomorrow if this particular transaction is to be reported, or if there is any query, or if this gets flagged by a law enforcement agency, like CBI says, I want to know about this transaction. So the exchange or the reporting entity should be in a position to tell as to where the money is coming from, and where and through whom it's going. So, but in case of crypto, this travel rule is something which is a little of a concern, because we are having what we call as a kind of a sunrise issue here. So yes, Goran, these are various set of obligations. Non-compliance with any of them is what qualify as a breach under Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and would thus invite action under Section 13 of the compliance action under Section 13 of Prevention of Money Laundering Act.
So these set of compliance notices that were issued, is this the first batch after 2023 when this came under the ambit of the Act?
Yeah, this was the first, set of notices which has been issued, and of course it's an ongoing process, and so these have been identified. So as and when more are identified or more come into our notice, and we realize that they are not complying with the law of the land, so notices will, the adequate compliance action under the law will follow. Yes.
So from a user's perspective, from people who are utilizing these platforms, are there any caveats? Are there any, things that one needs to be aware of or be careful about?
I think for the Indian users, it's better to transact, on the platform or through a platform which is compliant with the laws of the land. So yes, more prudent to transact through the platform which is registered, with the relevant authorities in India, because it is safer, I would say. Yes.
Right. So is there an obligation for these platforms to have like a full declaration of what they're compliant with, what they're not compliant with, so that, there is transparency if a user wants to utilize a platform? Or is the fine print like so fine that, users really struggle with it?
See, Guran, here the catch is that it is this is a sector which is like a fledgling sector. So across the world, there are countries which are trying to regulate. Some are in the process, some have done it, and some are still in a fix what to do. So I'm not sure how much clarity will any platform be able to publicly provide or declare. And since the nature is such, that it's completely borderless, so it's possible that a citizen from some nation is using the platform. So I'm not sure how much is the platform publicly providing the information. Like somebody from Australia wants to access a platform which is in Seychelles, and I'm not sure what Australian law requires and whether that Seychelles entity is really
Right.
declaring that on its platform.
For the ones registered in India, we do have certain checks and balances and laws in place.
Yes, we do. So we have, other than the recent AML CFT regulation that has been brought into force, we also last year, Government of India in 2022 June, they are now subject to direct tax. So they are subject to income tax, both TDS as well as tax on capital gains. India now they are under other than that there are directions from Computer Emergency Response Team of India under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, that is MITI. So there are directions from them as well, to the virtual digital asset service providers. These are few, kind of regulations, which are applicable to the VDSPs in India.
Right. So as you said, it is an evolving area, and it's an area where I think even the regulatory bodies are growing and learning as time passes. And in terms of international cooperation, because it's like a growing field for everybody. And India has I'm sure India must be one of the largest in terms of traffic and volume, because we have such a large population, and more are actually moving. The younger they are, we are wanting to reap a demographic dividend, and this comes with that. So how are we placed internationally in terms of cooperation?
Yeah, that's very relevant here, Goran. So, and you have raised a very, very relevant point here. So, among the users, if we say so, as per the chain analysis, which is a leading crypto blockchain explorer entity. So, India is number one in terms of in its latest report, India ranks number one in the global crypto adoption index. So, which means that yes, there are a lot of Indian users, and as you said, could be because of age, could also be because of penetration of internet and technology. So as per the volume and traffic, yes, the numbers are quite substantial. On the international front, India is very active. In fact, India is quite proactive. India is member of Financial Action Task Force, so it is the main, as I said, international watchdog, for AML and CFT purposes, and it's the body which has been trying, for cooperation, because it is one area which where we really cannot make much headway unless all countries come on board, because there are issues. So India is member for that, and there's a recommendation 15 from FATF, which largely talks about the virtual digital asset service providers. So that is one. Plus, India recently joined the virtual asset contract group of FATF. So India is actively participating in that group as well. So that group brings across member nations discussing only the issues related to virtual digital asset service providers, as it's very dynamic and it's very evolving. So countries are trying to learn best practices from each other. Like if you have introduced a system for registration, how did you do it? If you're trying to bring them on board, how are you doing it? How are you handling the outliers? How have you enforced the system of reporting? How have you got the red flag indicators framed? And how are you trying to secure cooperation from the offshore entities? Because offshore entities are a concern everywhere. So international cooperation is quintessential here, and India is quite active not only through FATF but also through its regional style bodies, FSRBs as we call them, FATF regional style bodies. That is Asia Pacific Group of Money Laundering, and also Eurasian a group of money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism. India is also member of Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, which is essentially an international group of all the financial intelligence units across the world. So around 170 plus FIUs, come together and form this Egmont group. So through Egmont group also. So these are the various international forums, which are actively engaged, in coming out with, in helping countries, build capacity, in helping them understand how to develop systems, to effectively enforce, regulations, the MLCFT regulations for the VDSP sector. And also, of course, the peer learning, the learning from the best practices, like how are you doing it? I'm doing it like this. Okay, how are you doing it? So this is how on international front, the developments are there, and India is quite not only active, it's quite proactive in all these fronts. Yes.
Right. You'd earlier said that the Financial Intelligence Unit is also the central repository of information relating to suspicious financial transactions and cash transactions. So that means for people who are actually using these, or some could be actually conducting these transactions, there is always a digital footprint which is mapped and kept somewhere. And, so nobody should be lulled into a false sense of complacency that the transaction has happened. Nothing has really happened in the immediate future, but the digital footprint is there and you people are keeping a record, right?
Yes, and and that there's an obligation as well, what we call as a record-keeping obligation under Prevention of Money Laundering Act on all the reporting entities, including now the virtual digital asset service providers. And in this world, this is I would say this is even more convenient because it's all happening on blockchain, so it's all already getting stored. So otherwise, the obligation for record keeping is that for a period of 5 years or till the business relationship has ended, whichever is earlier, these records, as you said, they all have to be maintained. And as and when required, either by director FIU or by other LEAs or IAs, this information has to be reconstructed and provided to them as per the law. Yes.
So in terms of, I think the depth and the research and the diligence that your organization puts into the data, because you have very, very stringent regulators, the RBI, SEBI, IRDAI. So all these, and I'm sure there are quite a few checks and balances that have been put in place for you to function with great transparency and authenticity.
Yes, right, Goran. So when we say RBI, SEBI, IRDAI, so they happen to be the prudential regulators, right? So they look after all the aspects, relating to consumer protection, relating to general, compliance with the respective laws. Like in RBI's case, the RBI Act, in case of SEBI, the relevant law under SEBI. And as regards the Financial Intelligence Unit, it's an autonomous body and it reports to Economic Intelligence Council, which is headed by Honorable Finance Minister of India. So since the nature of the work is such, that it's very sensitive because it's intelligence. And so it's a body which reports directly to EIC and headed by Finance Minister of India.
So when we talk of, getting compliance issues reported, actually picking them up, and your cooperation with law enforcement agencies, where does it stop for you? Is it just providing information, or do you see that it's taken by the law enforcement agency to its, logical conclusion and action is taken?
Yeah, so because ideally it's, like that it gets, it's actionable and, it's just acted upon. And there's also a mechanism for feedback, so that, we also get to know as to whatever was, disseminated has been useful, whether or not it has been useful to them. So there's a proper feedback mechanism, and endeavor is to ensure that, whatever is disseminated is acted upon. Yes. And we get the feedback and use the feedback both for us, that is our analysis, and also, provide and pass it on to the reporting entities to help them improve or improvise their systems and processes as well.
Okay. So you must have seen over the past few years, more and more offshore companies wanting to come and actually operate within India and use, basically it's a huge market. So do you think that in terms of the scale, have we peaked, or is there more to go?
Goran, that's very difficult for me to say, being not the subject expert in crypto per se. But as I have seen this world, whatever time I've handled this assignment,
right.
All I can say that it is a very volatile world. And a lot of factors, internal, external, it's highly, highly volatile. So a lot of factors, interplay and decide as to, like some country just didn't have a regulation, suddenly it comes out with a regulation. So the gamut of things changes, the environment changes. So the regulatory, regime is one thing. There have been, like last year in US, we had this FTX, which was a very big crypto exchange, and there was a crisis, it collapsed. So, so since then there has been, like a crypto winter in US. So there are many factors, both localized kind of factors as well as external factors. So which ultimately decide as to how it's gonna fare. Right, but it keeps booming up and then goes down. So it's very difficult. It's a very volatile sector. Yes.
And I think it's also generational. There are some generations of investors which believe that it was a passing fancy and it didn't really may not stay. But right now we are seeing that the way people are moving into it, despite different countries have different taxations, different regimes look at it differently. It is definitely, I think, an area which has sustained over a period of time. Cryptocurrency and trading in that and buying and selling in that is here to stay.
Yes, looks like, given the present trends, looks like, yes, it is here to stay. But again, it's very volatile and very unpredictable.
Right. I like the word you're using, volatile and unpredictable, because it's something we use constantly for the share market. And it has, over the past few years, we have seen that volatility is a word which is second nature. And I think anywhere, because with the world becoming so interconnected, with the butterfly effect of being so strongly felt across the world from one country to the other, we're more closely linked. And yes, with this, volatility is going to happen. Wanting to understand from you that when we talk of fiscal prudence or financial prudence, and I think the digital area, I mean, I know we've spoken about, a couple of things which are very, very closely technically linked to what you are studying, you are researching and analyzing. But in terms, and this is particularly linked for our listeners, that the digital stamp and the digital, I think the effect is there in everybody's life in whatever way. So would you suggest some general, checks and balances from a general security point of view, which anybody engaging with this digital world, whether it's linked to crypto or any financial transaction, should keep in mind?
Right. So I would say, Gurhan, that, since cyber, fraud, as we call it, is something which is very, very rampant, because sitting here and analyzing the transactions, we see it almost on a daily basis. So the first advice that I would give, and which I very religiously follow, is please don't click on any links which are, received by you, which are unverified links. So that is one. Always access it from a secure, browser. And as of course you would, your banks would keep telling you, don't share your passwords or, your OTPs. Because this is the flip side of technology, which has so deeply penetrated into our lives, that I think there hardly goes a day, when we don't get OTPs, right? So this is the flip side, that we have, and we have to be smart enough to be able to, enjoy the technology, enjoy its fruits, and yet at the same time, insulate ourselves, from the pitfalls or the perils that it brings with it. So don't click on any links that you receive. Don't fall into prey into any alluring schemes, because there's no free lunch. So don't get into any kind of a scheme which tells you that you give me this much and I'm going to double it in crypto, or this is a new coin that is coming up. So be very careful, and verify where you are investing, because there are a host lot of frauds going on, investment fraud, job fraud, exam fraud, and so on and so forth. So be very careful about who you are giving money to, who you are sharing your financial details, particularly your OTP, your passwords. Keep them as difficult as you can, and change them as often, or at least as per the mandate required. And you can, and in case still there's anything that happens, please immediately report it to, there's a portal, called as NCRP portal, National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, at 1930. So that's an excellent initiative. That there's a system that we use called as CFCF-RMS, which can immediately block the funds, which have wherein any kind of fraud has happened. So I would say, these are the various, kinds of various kinds of advice that I would give to the listeners. Yes.
Ashima, thank you so much. You gave us international, Indian, and the individual perspective. Thank you for joining us on our program.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on warning to offshore digital service providers. The Financial Intelligence Unit India issues compliance notices. The participants were Ashima Batra, Additional Director, Financial Intelligence Unit India, and Gaura Dhawan Lal, Anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.